A millionaire stopped in his tracks when he saw a poor boy dancing in the rain with his paralyzed daughter. What followed left the whole crowd speechless, and when the truth about who the boy really was came to light, the millionaire could not hold back his tears. Before we begin, type in the comments where you are watching from and get ready for a story that will touch your heart. The late afternoon sky over New York City was a watercolor of gray and silver, clouds swollen with rain drifting low over the skyline. Central Park, that great green heart of the city, glistened under a steady curtain of rain. Puddles spread across the winding pathways, the trees shivered with dripping leaves, and the occasional horse-drawn carriage rattled past, its driver hunched deep under a slicker. It was a day when most families had hurried indoors, leaving the park almost deserted, except for a few runners stubbornly testing their resilience against the weather. Michael Harris sat behind the wheel of his sleek black town car, staring out at the blurred world beyond the windshield. At 45 years old, Michael was the picture of success. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair just beginning to gray at the temples, his expensive tailored suit sat perfectly even when he slouched in weariness. His face, angular and serious, rarely broke into a smile these days. Known throughout the city as a powerful real estate mogul, his empire stretched across half of Manhattan, his name attached to gleaming towers of glass and steel. Yet, behind the commanding presence and polished exterior, he carried an invisible weight, the weight of a father's helpless grief. In the back seat sat Lily Harris, his only child. 7 years old, she was delicate and small for her age, her hair a cascade of golden curls that framed a pale, thoughtful face. Her blue eyes, once sparkling with mischief, now carried a shadow that no child should bear. 6 months ago, a car accident had left her paralyzed from the waist down. She moved now only with the help of her wheelchair, her fragile legs tucked beneath a blanket despite the summer warmth. Where once she had been restless and vibrant, now she spent her days in silence, speaking only when necessary. Therapy sessions, specialists, endless hospital visits, all had yielded little progress. The house had grown quieter, filled more with echoes than laughter. Michael would have traded every dollar of his fortune to hear his daughter's carefree giggle again. The car pulled to the curb near the south entrance of Central Park. Michael stepped out first, lifting an umbrella, and then carefully helped Lily into her wheelchair. She wore a soft lavender raincoat and white sneakers she would never walk in again. She didn't complain, but her silence hurt Michael more than tears would have. He pushed her gently along the path, wheels clicking softly over the wet pavement. The park was hushed, but not empty. The sound of the rain on leaves was broken suddenly by something unexpected. Music without instruments, rhythm without a band. It was the sound of feet splashing in puddles, of swift motion against the water. Michael slowed, frowning, as Lily's head turned sharply toward an open space near the fountain. There, in the rain, was a boy. He couldn't have been older than 8. His clothes were torn and far too big. For his small frame, a faded sweatshirt clinging to his thin shoulders, jeans ripped at the knees, sneakers worn to threads. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his skin had the pale look of a child who hadn't known regular meals. Yet, what captured attention wasn't his ragged appearance, but his movement. The boy danced. Every step, every leap, every spin held the grace of a trained performer. His arms sliced through the rain as though conducting a silent orchestra. His body arched and turned with a fluency that spoke of both discipline and raw talent. Drops of water flew like jewels from his fingertips. He spun, leapt, and then slid into a fluid pose that seemed almost otherworldly. It was ballet. It was street. It was joy uncontained, a rebellion against hunger and hardship. He danced as if the rain itself were his partner. "Daddy," Lily's voice, quiet for so long, rang out with sudden urgency. "Look." Michael followed her gaze, though his eyes were already locked on the boy. But what stunned him even more than the performance was Lily herself. Her face, usually drawn with sadness, now lit with a spark he hadn't seen since before the accident. She leaned forward in her chair, pressing her hands to the glass railing by the path. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "He dances like the angels in my dreams." Michael's throat tightened. He hadn't heard that tone in her voice for months. It was awe, wonder, joy, feelings he had almost believed were gone from her forever. And then, with a soft bark, another figure joined the scene. At the boy's side sat a large German shepherd, its thick coat dark gray with streaks of black. The animal was powerful, muscled, yet something immediately unusual stood out. A strip of white cloth tied neatly across its eyes. The dog was blind. Despite its lack of sight, it sat alert, ears twitching at every movement, its head lifting toward the boy, as if it could see through sound alone. This was Rex. 7 years old, once a police dog in training, Rex had lost his sight in an accident years before being abandoned at a shelter. Anna Collins, the boy's late mother, had adopted him despite his disability. And now, Rex was more than a companion. He was protector, guardian, brother. His blindness had not dulled his spirit. If anything, it had sharpened his instincts. When Ethan danced, Rex barked in rhythmic bursts, almost like percussion, as though keeping time for his friend's performance. The boy, Ethan, twirled again, and Rex let out a low, playful bark, earning a laugh from the small audience that had begun to form under umbrellas. But not all the onlookers were kind. A couple of teenagers, sheltering beneath a tree, pointed and snickered. "Look at that kid," one jeered, "dancing in the rain like a fool." Their laughter carried through the drizzle, sharp and cruel. Ethan faltered mid-spin, his dark eyes flicking toward them. But before he could shrink back, Rex rose to his feet. The blind dog barked sharply, his teeth bared though he could not see the offenders. He stood between Ethan and the laughter, body tense, ears pinned back. The boys cursed and hurried off, muttering about crazy kids and crazy dogs. Ethan bent down, pressing a hand gently to Rex's wet fur. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured, voice low, protective. His accent was the unpolished drawl of a child raised by streets rather than teachers, but the affection in his tone was unmistakable. "They don't matter. We dance anyway." Michael's chest tightened again. This boy, ragged and poor, possessed a kind of courage he saw rarely in boardrooms filled with men twice his age. And his dog, crippled yet defiant, stood like a knight for his tiny kingdom of rain. "Daddy," Lily said again, tugging at his sleeve. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement, her blue eyes wide. "Can we go closer? Please?" Michael hesitated, his heart warring between caution and his daughter's fragile joy. He had built towers out of steel and glass, commanded entire teams with a word, but in this moment he felt powerless before her pleading. He nodded slowly and pushed her wheelchair forward. As they drew nearer, Ethan noticed them. His dance came to an abrupt halt. He froze like a cornered deer, eyes wide, chest heaving from exertion. He clutched Rex's collar, ready to bolt. "I'm sorry, sir," the boy stammered, voice trembling. "I wasn't bothering nobody. I swear. I'll leave." Before Michael could respond, Lily's voice rang out with an urgency he hadn't heard in months. "Wait!" Her words cut through the rain like a bell. Ethan blinked at her, startled as she continued, "Please don't go. You dance like magic." The boy hesitated, eyes darting between Michael's expensive suit and Lily's wheelchair. Suspicion lingered in his face, suspicion carved by years of disappointment. But her sincerity held him still. He said nothing, only swallowed hard and held Rex closer. The rain fell heavier, cloaking the park in silver curtains. Around them, the city pulsed with indifference, traffic honking in the distance. But here, in the quiet heart of the storm, something fragile began to stir. A connection between a silent girl, a guarded boy, and a blind dog who barked to the rhythm of hope. And for the first time in 6 months, Michael Harris allowed himself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, healing could begin not in the sterile rooms of hospitals, but in the rain-soaked steps of a boy who refused to stop dancing. The rain had softened to a mist by the time silence fell between them, the boy clutching his dog's collar and Lily leaning forward in her chair, eyes wide with wonder. For a long heartbeat, only the sound of dripping branches filled the air. Michael stood there, umbrella useless at his side, watching the fragile connection spark between his daughter and the boy. "Don't go," Lily said again, her small hands gripping the sides of her chair. "Please, you dance like you're telling a story, and I want to hear it." The boy, Ethan, shifted uneasily, his thin frame tense. His face was narrow, cheeks hollow, and a jagged scar stretched faintly across his chin, the remnant of some forgotten fall. His eyes, though dark and guarded, carried the look of someone far older than his 8 years, eyes that had seen alleys, shelters, and the kind of nights no child should know. His suspicion was instinctive, the shield he had built to survive. Rex, ever attuned, pressed his broad body closer to Ethan's leg. The blind German shepherd stood tall despite the white cloth tied neatly across his eyes. His ears twitched toward Lily's voice, his posture protective. Michael stepped forward, speaking gently, careful not to startle the boy. "My daughter doesn't talk to many people these days," he said. "But you've managed something rare. You made her smile." Ethan's gaze darted from Michael's expensive suit to Lily's wheelchair, then back to Michael. People don't want me around," he muttered. His voice was husky from the damp air, words clipped, defensive. "They see me, and they tell me to move along." Lily leaned forward, her curls clinging damply to her cheeks. "Well, I want you here," she said with quiet determination. Michael watched his daughter and felt a pang in his chest. There was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there for months, fragile but alive. He would have given anything to protect that light. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. "There's a diner just across the street. Warm food, hot chocolate. Why don't you and your dog come with us?" The invitation seemed to shock Ethan. His eyes widened and he took a step back, nearly stumbling into a puddle. "No," he blurted, shaking his head fiercely. "I can't. You'll call somebody. They'll take me away, put me in a place, a foster home, or worse." Rex gave a soft, uneasy bark, as though agreeing with his boy's fears. Ethan tightened his grip on the dog's collar, his small body trembling, not from cold, but from mistrust. Michael opened his mouth to reassure him, but before he could speak, a figure staggered from the shadows beneath the park's underpass. The man was tall but hunched, his dirty trench coat hanging loose around his skeletal frame. His hair was matted, his beard unkempt, and his eyes were bloodshot with hunger and rage. This was Harold, a drifter known among the city's forgotten corners. He had once been a dock worker until an accident shattered his leg and left him limping. Alcohol had taken the rest of his life. His bitterness festered, and now he prowled the streets like a wolf searching for scraps. Harold's gaze fixed instantly on Ethan, or, more precisely, on the crumpled paper bag at the boy's feet. Inside, a half-eaten sandwich scavenged from a bakery's trash. "Hand it over, boy," Harold rasped, voice low and dangerous. "Food's mine now." Ethan froze, his eyes wide with terror. He bent instinctively to grab the bag, but Harold lurched forward, reaching out with a filthy hand. Before the man could take another step, Rex surged forward. The blind shepherd moved with astonishing certainty, teeth bared, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. He planted himself between Ethan and the threat, hackles raised, barking in short, sharp bursts that echoed through the park. The sight of a large German shepherd, even blind, gave Harold pause. He snarled, staggering back slightly, but his hunger outweighed his fear. "That mutt can't even see me," he spat. "He's useless." But Rex proved otherwise. Though his eyes were covered, his ears tracked every shuffle of Harold's shoes, every ragged breath. He moved with precision, cutting Harold off each time he tried to advance. His growls grew sharper, louder, echoing with a force that belied his blindness. "Stay back!" Ethan cried, crouching to clutch Rex's neck. His voice trembled with desperation, but there was a surprising note of defiance in it. Michael stepped forward quickly, his voice ringing out, commanding in a way honed from years of boardrooms and negotiations. "Enough! Back away!" Harold turned his bloodshot gaze on Michael and sneered. "Rich man," he muttered, his words slurred. "Always taking everything. Maybe I should take from you instead." Michael felt his pulse quicken, but he held his ground. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a few bills, holding them out. "Here, take this and leave the boy alone." Harold's eyes darted to the money, greed flickering through his anger. He snatched the bills, his hands shaking, and stumbled back toward the underpass. "This ain't over," he muttered, disappearing into the shadows like a ghost swallowed by the rain. The silence that followed was tense, broken only by Rex's low growls gradually softening as Ethan whispered into his fur. Michael exhaled slowly, steadying himself, then crouched to meet Ethan's eyes. "You see," Michael said softly, "your dog isn't useless. He's more loyal and braver than most men I know." Ethan blinked at him, his suspicion still present but wavering. He looked down at Rex, who sat proudly despite his damp fur, tail thumping against the ground, as if to reassure the boy. He's all I've got," Ethan whispered. "He keeps me safe. Even when I'm scared, he's never scared." Lily's voice chimed in gently. "That makes him a hero," she said, smiling shyly. "And that makes you special too, because you're his best friend." Ethan stared at her, confused by the kindness in her tone. It had been so long since anyone had looked at him without pity or disdain. For the first time, he felt something stir inside him that wasn't fear, something he couldn't yet name. Michael glanced between his daughter and the boy, and the realization struck him like a quiet thunderclap. This child, ragged and wary, had managed to spark something alive in Lily's heart. And perhaps, just perhaps, Lily and Ethan could both find in each other the fragments of joy they had lost. Michael stood slowly, brushing rain from his suit. "The offer for hot chocolate still stands," he said. "No strings? Just a meal, you've got my word." Ethan hesitated, torn between mistrust and the pull of something he didn't want to admit: hope. Rex nudged his leg, as if sensing the moment, his blind eyes hidden, but his loyalty clear. The boy didn't answer yet, but the seed had been planted. In the mist of Central Park, beneath the trembling branches and fading storm, something fragile began to grow: trust. The mist of the rain lingered long into the evening, wrapping Central Park in a silver haze. The lamps along the pathways glowed weakly, their halos blurring in the damp air. Michael stood where Ethan had been only minutes earlier, the echo of the boy's voice and Rex's protective barks still vibrating in his chest. Lily was quiet now, watching her father with wide, curious eyes, as if sensing something in him she couldn't yet name. At Michael's feet lay something crumpled, wet, and half hidden in the mud. He bent down, brushing the dirt away with careful fingers. It was a photograph, edges worn soft by time. He straightened and held it beneath the dim light of a lamppost. His heart stilled. The picture was small but clear enough. Ethan, perhaps 5 years old, smiling shyly beside a woman whose face Michael knew as intimately as his own reflection: Anna Collins. Her chestnut hair tumbled around her shoulders, her hazel eyes warm and alive. She was dressed simply, a cream cardigan over a floral dress, but her presence seemed to radiate through the years. Michael's breath caught, his grip tightening around the photo. Anna, the woman he had loved in his youth, the woman who had vanished from his life and been reported dead in an accident nearly a decade ago. Yet here she was, captured with the boy who had just danced in the rain. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small, almost a whisper. "Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" Michael quickly folded the photograph, slipping it into his pocket. He forced a smile for his daughter. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Let's get you home." But inside, nothing was simple. Inside, the ground had shifted beneath him. That night, long after Lily had fallen asleep, Michael sat in his study, the rain ticking against the windows. He spread the photograph on his desk, staring at Anna's face. His memories unspooled, college days filled with laughter, whispered promises under summer skies. The sharp pain of their parting when life pulled them apart. He had believed she was gone forever. Now, impossibly, she lived again through this boy. The next morning, Michael made calls. Years of business taught him how to find answers where others saw dead ends. Within hours, he tracked down a name: Sarah Whitman, a nurse who had worked at a long-term care facility in New Jersey. The name was scribbled beside Anna's in the records he obtained. Sarah was in her late 50s, tall and willowy, with silver hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck. Her face carried the lines of decades of care, compassion and exhaustion woven into every crease. She had once been vibrant, she told Michael later, but years of watching patients fade had hardened her. She was kind, but her kindness was wrapped in a shell of pragmatism, the armor she needed to keep from breaking. When Michael arrived at the modest apartment where Sarah now lived, she studied him with cautious eyes. Her living room was tidy, filled with books and the faint smell of lavender. A worn armchair sat near the window where a cat, a thin tabby named Clover, watched him warily with golden eyes. "You're here about Anna Collins," Sarah said without preamble, her voice steady but tinged with fatigue. Michael nodded, holding out the photograph. "This boy? Ethan? He's hers?" Sarah looked at the picture, and for the first time her composure cracked. She sighed, folding her hands in her lap. "Yes, Ethan is Anna's son." The words rang like bells in Michael's mind, and with them, a weight heavier than any business deal he had ever faced. He swallowed hard. "And his father?" Sarah's gaze lifted to meet his. There was a pause before she spoke. Anna never said much, but in her clearer moments, she spoke of a man named Michael. She said he was her first love, the one she lost. Michael felt his chest tighten. He leaned back, gripping the arms of his chair, as if anchoring himself against a tide. Sarah continued, her voice softening as she wove the story. "Anna came to us already fragile. She was young, far too young for dementia, but the disease doesn't care about age. At first she had moments of clarity. She talked about her boy constantly, and about you. In her room, she kept sketchbooks filled with drawings. Most were of Ethan, but some were of a little girl she'd never met. A girl in a wheelchair, sitting beside Ethan. She said the two belonged together." Michael's hand trembled against his knee. He thought of Lily, her laughter finally returning yesterday when she saw Ethan dance. "And Rex?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Sarah's eyes softened. Rex was Anna's dog before the blindness set in, a German shepherd she trained herself. When her mind began to slip, Rex adapted. He became more than a companion. He became her eyes, and later, Ethan's protector. Even when she forgot her own name, she never forgot Rex. He was her constant. Michael pictured the proud shepherd standing in the rain, blindfolded yet unyielding. He realized now the depth of that loyalty. It had been forged in years of guiding not just a woman, but a boy left to fend for himself. Sarah leaned forward, her expression grave. "When Anna's condition worsened, she asked me to make sure Ethan was safe. But the system..." She shook her head, bitterness sharpening her tone. "It failed him. He slipped through, ended up on the streets. Rex stayed with him, always. They only had each other." Michael pressed a hand to his mouth, his thoughts a storm. Ethan was not just some boy from the park. He was his son, flesh and blood, abandoned by circumstance and fate. For a long moment, the room was silent, but for the hum of the old refrigerator and Clover's soft purring. Michael's eyes stung, though he fought to hide it. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Sarah's gaze was sympathetic but firm. "Anna didn't know how to reach you. By the time her memory slipped further, it was too late." She hesitated, then added softly, "But she never stopped saying your name." Michael closed his eyes, the weight of her words pressing down. The truth had shattered the careful order of his life, but beneath the wreckage lay something undeniable, a chance at redemption, and perhaps at healing. When he opened them again, he looked at Sarah with a resolve she hadn't expected. "Then I have to find him. I have to bring him home." Sarah studied him, her lips pressed together, then finally nodded. "If you mean it, truly mean it, then do right by him. Ethan's been through more than most men endure in a lifetime, and he won't trust easily." Michael rose, slipping the photograph carefully back into his pocket. His hands were steady now. He felt the stirrings of something he hadn't felt in years. Not just responsibility, but purpose. As he left Sarah's apartment, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long golden beams across the city. For the first time, Michael wondered if fate had woven this strange tapestry all along. Lily, Ethan, Rex, Anna's memory. Threads drawn back together by love, loss, and destiny. The Harris estate sat on the outskirts of Manhattan, a place where city bustle softened into wide lawns and tall iron gates. That evening, as the sun melted into hues of gold and crimson, Michael opened the heavy front doors, ushering Ethan and Rex inside. For the boy, the marble floors and gleaming chandeliers seemed unreal, like stepping into a dream he could not trust. He kept close to Rex, one hand brushing the shepherd's thick fur, the other curled protectively at his chest. Michael crouched beside him, his voice quiet but firm. "This is your home now, Ethan. At least, if you'll let it be." For the first time, Ethan looked up at him, eyes a cautious shade of blue that mirrored Anna's. He didn't reply, but his silence carried less defiance than before. It was the silence of someone testing the edges of hope. In the living room, Lily sat waiting in her wheelchair, her golden hair combed neatly, a ribbon tied by her nanny. Her face lit up the moment she saw Ethan. "You came back!" she exclaimed, her voice bubbling like spring water. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Lily patted the space beside her. "Sit. I want to show you something." From the table she picked up a music box. It was old, carved with roses, and when she wound it, a gentle melody filled the room. "I can't dance," Lily said, "but I pretend. Maybe you can dance for both of us?" Ethan's lips twitched, the ghost of a smile threatening to surface. Slowly, shyly, he stood and began to mimic a ballet pose. His feet, dirty sneakers and all, slid carefully against the polished floor. His arms lifted in arcs, his body moving with grace that seemed born of instinct rather than training. Lily clapped, laughing, her cheeks flushed pink. "Again!" she cried. "This time, I'll move too." She spun her chair in small circles, her hands guiding the wheels as if she were his partner. For the first time since her accident, her laughter rang through the house like music. Michael stood in the doorway, watching with a lump in his throat. His home, once silent and echoing with absence, now hummed with joy. For a brief shining moment, all seemed whole, but shadows never linger far from light. That same night, across town, Richard Harris poured himself a glass of whiskey in his penthouse. Michael's younger brother was in his early 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair darker than Michael's, but touched at the temples with premature gray. His suits were tailored to perfection, his smile practiced for boardrooms and political gatherings. Richard's ambition was legend. He had always chased power with a hunger that consumed even family ties. Now, leaning against the window that overlooked the glittering skyline, Richard studied the photographs delivered to him by a private investigator. Ethan, standing beside Lily's wheelchair, Rex at his side. The boy's resemblance to Anna Collins was undeniable. Richard smirked, swirling his glass. "So," he murmured to himself, "my perfect brother has a secret, a hidden son from the past." He took a sip of whiskey, the amber liquid burning his throat. "Let's see how the board reacts when they learn of this little scandal." The next morning, in the Harris garden, Lily wheeled herself along the stone path, Ethan walking beside her, Rex leading with his head tilted high, despite the white scarf tied across his blind eyes. The garden was lush, roses blooming, birds scattering in the morning air. Lily reached down to pluck a daisy and handed it to Ethan. "You know," she whispered, "we're kind of the same." Ethan looked at her, puzzled. She smiled softly, her voice tender. "We're both broken in different ways, but when I'm with you, I don't feel broken anymore." The words settled over Ethan like a balm. He swallowed, his throat tight, and for the first time, his eyes glistened. He didn't answer, but the silence was no longer guarded. It was open, trembling, fragile. Then came the stone. It flew from the bushes, striking the ground near Rex with a sharp crack. The shepherd jerked back, barking, his blind eyes hidden but his body tense, hackles raised. Another stone followed, grazing his flank. Rex growled low, stepping between the children and the bushes. Ethan gasped, pulling Lily's chair closer. "Who's there?" A shadow moved quickly through the hedge, a man in a dark hoodie sprinting away before they could see his face. Michael came running from the veranda, his voice sharp. "What happened?" "Someone threw rocks," Ethan shouted, pointing toward the hedge. Michael knelt beside Rex, his hand brushing the dog's fur where the stone had grazed. No blood, but the shepherd trembled with suppressed rage. Michael's jaw tightened. He knew instantly this wasn't random. It was a warning. Later, in his study, Michael sat alone, staring at the fire crackling in the hearth. He could feel the walls closing in, his daughter's laughter, Ethan's newfound presence, the fragile thread of peace. They were all under threat. He thought of Richard, and a cold certainty settled in his gut. His brother was behind this. Yet, when he returned to the living room, Lily and Ethan were together on the rug, drawing with colored pencils. Rex lay stretched beside them, one ear pricked, guarding as always. Michael stood quietly, watching the three of them, and made a silent vow. No matter what shadows his brother cast, he would not let them steal this fragile light. The morning was gray, the sky a quilt of clouds heavy with rain, as if the heavens themselves awaited judgment. The courthouse in downtown Manhattan loomed tall, its stone pillars scarred with time, but still imposing. People moved in and out beneath umbrellas, their hurried footsteps echoing against the marble steps. Inside, the atmosphere was colder than the weather. Sharp whispers, the clicking of polished shoes, the shuffling of papers that seemed to carry the weight of lives. Michael Harris stood near the entrance of the courtroom, his broad shoulders stiff beneath his dark suit. Lines of exhaustion carved deeper into his face, though his eyes remained resolute. Beside him sat Lily in her wheelchair, a blue ribbon tied in her hair, her small hands folded tightly as if in silent prayer. On Michael's other side was Ethan, pale and tense, his hair damp from the rain, his thin frame swallowed by a borrowed shirt and jacket. One hand clutched the fur of Rex, who sat obediently at his feet. Across the aisle, Richard Harris adjusted his tie with the smug precision of a man who believed victory was inevitable. He whispered to a man beside him, Samuel Green, a CPS, Child Protective Services, officer with thinning blonde hair, a pockmarked face, and eyes that avoided direct contact. Green was known in whispers for flexibility, easily swayed by favors and money. Richard leaned in, lips barely moving, his smile hidden. The judge entered, and silence fell. Judge Margaret Holloway was in her 60s, tall and silver-haired, with a stern face softened only by faint crow's feet around her eyes. Her reputation was one of integrity. She was not swayed by theatrics, but by facts and truth. Her gavel struck once, echoing through the chamber. We are here today regarding custody of the minor, Ethan Collins. The CPS attorney presented their case first, painting Ethan as a neglected child in need of proper guardianship. They described Michael's sudden claim of paternity as suspicious, unsupported, even manipulative. Richard sat back, feigning sorrow, though his lips curled with triumph. When it was Michael's turn, he rose slowly, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. Your Honor, this is not about power or politics. This is about a boy who has spent too many nights alone, too many mornings without safety. I know this because I wasn't there for him when he needed me most. But I am here now, and I will not let him be taken again. He laid evidence before the court. A DNA test confirming beyond doubt that Ethan was his biological son. Letters from Anna written years before her decline, mentioning Michael as the father. He placed on the stand Nurse Caroline Evans, a kind woman in her 50s with auburn hair tied in a bun, who had cared for Anna in New Jersey. Her voice trembled as she recounted nights when Anna, lost in her dementia, still clutched drawings of a man with gray eyes and a little girl in a wheelchair dancing with Ethan. The courtroom grew hushed. Even the CPS lawyer faltered, but the moment that silenced the entire chamber came unexpectedly. During a recess, when Ethan was called to approach the bench, his steps faltered. Fear washed over him, and he froze midway, his small frame trembling. Then Rex moved. Though blind, the shepherd pressed against Ethan, guiding him with a steady pace, step by step, until the boy stood before the judge. The sight was unlike anything the court had seen. A blind dog leading a frightened boy to safety, his loyalty unshaken, his courage absolute. The room fell utterly still. Even Judge Holloway's expression softened. Richard's composure cracked. He leaned forward, whispering harshly to Green. But the damage was done. Whispers spread among the observers about corruption, about how CPS had moved too quickly, how Green's name had appeared in questionable cases before. A reporter scribbled furiously, the sound of her pen like nails hammering into Richard's coffin. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was clear, deliberate. The evidence is irrefutable. Ethan Collins is the biological son of Michael Harris. Furthermore, the actions of CPS in this matter raise grave concerns about undue influence and possible corruption, which this court will not ignore. Therefore, Custody of Ethan Collins is hereby granted to his father, Michael Harris. Her gavel struck. The sound rang like a final chord of justice. Ethan's chest hitched. He turned to Michael, his small hands gripping his father's jacket. For the first time, words burst out through his tears. Dad. The single word carried years of silence, pain, and longing. Michael embraced him, his own tears unashamed. Lily clapped, her laughter bright as bells, and Rex barked once as if declaring victory. Richard stood in the shadows, his plans unraveling, his name now whispered with suspicion. He turned sharply, leaving the courtroom before the reporters could swarm him. Days later, the Harris home was alive with transformation. The grand parlor, once a place of formal silence, was cleared of heavy furniture. In its place stood mirrors, a wooden floor polished for movement, and bars fixed along the wall. Michael had opened a studio, small, intimate, designed for children who had once been told, "You can't." On the first evening, a soft rain fell outside, tapping against the windows. Inside, the children gathered. Some were in wheelchairs, others with braces, some shy, some eager. Lily rolled to the center, her eyes sparkling. Ethan stood beside her, his hand extended as if inviting her to a dance. Rex lay near the wall, his blind eyes turned toward them, his ears pricked to the music. When the melody began, faintly the same tune from Lily's old music box, the children moved. Wheels spun, feet slid, arms rose. It wasn't perfect, but it was radiant. Ethan lifted his arms, his body finding rhythm, and Lily spun her, chair in time. They named the piece themselves, Home in the Rain. Michael watched from the doorway, his heart full. For once there were no shadows, no whispers of betrayal, only laughter, music, and the promise that brokenness could be reshaped into something beautiful. The last dance had only just begun. Sometimes the greatest miracles do not come with thunder or lightning. They come quietly, through a blind dog who still finds the strength to guide, through a broken boy who learns to call a father Dad, through a girl in a wheelchair who teaches others how to dance with joy. These are not accidents. They are whispers of God's hand at work in ordinary lives. Just as Michael found his son again, and just as Ethan discovered a home in the rain, each of us can find healing, love, and belonging when we trust in the path God lays before us. Even in the darkest courtroom, even in the heaviest storm, His light can break through. If you believe God still works miracles every day, type Amen in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. And do not forget to subscribe so that together we can keep spreading these stories of faith, love, and redemption. May God bless you and your family always.